Welcome to the Creating Alignment Podcast, episode 11. Today I have a special guest, a good friend of mine who I've only met recently enough. Harison is on the podcast. We are going to speak about self-sabotage, our experience with self-sabotage, and some of the ways that we can sabotage our growth and our results. First of all, Harison, give us a little breakdown about who you are, what you do.
Hey man, well yeah, firstly, awesome to be here. Super stoked that you've had me on, and yeah, super excited to get into self-sabotage as well. I know it's something you've worked on a lot, and speaking behind the scenes, something that we both have struggled with in the past. So super excited to get onto that. Yeah, a bit of background for myself then. I always find these questions super interesting because where do you even start? I guess for me, in terms of what I'm doing now, I started off had a very privileged upbringing, right? Went to good university, studied Spanish and business, really enjoyed it, and yeah, traveled the world, and I've kind of been on my own self-development journey, a journey of real self-discovery. And I'd say, yeah, when I was 19, that was the first time where I had a big sort of breakthrough moment, and that was where I was like, wow, okay, my whole reality has just done a 180. I was like, hang on a sec, what sort of life am I living? I had a very tough incident, and from then I started the path of rebuilding myself, and that's been a whole journey of self-discovery. I went out of university, went through these different ups and downs moments, thinking, right, I've got it all figured out. I know what's going on inside my head now. And then I'd go for another blip, and then I'd keep on going again. And then I'd find a bit of momentum. Then I'd have another blip. And I kept on dealing with these symptoms of something, but I wasn't quite sure or wary of what it was. But I was noticing patterns in my behavior that I wanted to change. And that was the key that I wanted to change, right? So for me, I was noticing all these things, and slowly, like one by one, I'd notice something. Okay, right, I need to change that aspect of myself. That isn't serving me. And for me, the big one was people pleasing. And I noticed the biggest lesson that I got, which is the pattern of behavior that led to my difficult challenge, if you like. The observation I got was, okay, I'm not communicating my needs. I'm not stating that something has annoyed me or something's angered me. I always prided myself on being the chilled out guy who doesn't really rock the boat, doesn't cause conflict, he's liked by everyone. But subconsciously, I know now that I just wanted to fit in, right? I think at school, had some cool moments, great moments, especially during sport. But a lot of the time, especially when I was younger, I found it very difficult to fit in. I had very low self-esteem, and I'd shrink myself, play small, and the behavior that I learned growing up, that then carried forward into adulthood. And like I said, it was when I was 19, this event happened and really got me thinking. So people pleasing was the big one that I really wanted to get rid of. And I was making progress and making all these discoveries. And eventually I had this huge realization that I was battling the symptoms of something in particular, something a lot greater. And that was the nice guy syndrome. And I was reading this book called No More Mr. Nice Guy, Robert Glover. It's an absolute classic. And I read it and I thought, that's really strange. I think he's describing me in this book, but hang on, I didn't experience the same stuff as what he's describing. And then I had this big moment where I was like, oh, hang on a sec. Like all this stuff actually did happen to me, but I thought it was normal. And it really got me on a path of thinking, right, the nice guy syndrome really holds you back. And we will talk about this later, but it's essentially using niceness as a fear-based strategy to avoid rejection, right? You want to gain the approval of other people. And again, we'll touch on external validation later because I find that an interesting subject, but I think you rely very heavily on that. And for me, I didn't realize that in my own journey. I thought I was just a normal bloke, and everyone else who relies on external validation or is like battling people pleasing massively, like those are other people. That's not me. So I read this book and I was like, oh wow, okay, there's a lot of work to do here. And at that point on, I thought, okay, you know, I need to help other people who are going through the same journey because they're playing small and they have so much to offer the world. There's so much we can offer the world by just being ourselves and stepping into authenticity, but a lot of people don't. It can be scary. It can be very scary showing yourself to the world. And even if you are ready to sort of break out and be your own person, there's going to be a lot of resistance from that. And often it's from the people who we value the most in our lives. And I've been really dedicating myself to this process, especially in the last 6 months or so, getting really, really heavy on it because there's so many different directions and areas in life which are affected by this nice guy syndrome, right? And what I'm all about now is helping guys step into their authenticity. And right now it's also about, okay, how do people access that warrior archetype, right? We've got 4 archetypes as a man, and it's king, warrior, magician, lover. And I really identify with the warrior. It's someone who keeps himself to himself. He isn't bravado. He's not alpha necessarily, but he's very focused on his own mission. He's not worried about the petty stuff. And I think a lot of guys, they struggle a lot of the time because, especially if you have low self-esteem like I did, you put on this mask and you feel like you have to be somebody else. And the problem is when you do that, you end up very disconnected. You end up resenting a lot of people. You have all this built up anger, and then you get angry at the world, and then you resent your anger, which is just another part of yourself. So I've really been exploring this idea of, okay, how can we understand our emotions better so that we can attack everyday life and love the parts of ourselves? And it's a big process. It's a never-ending journey. But from my experience, the more you work on yourself, the more opportunities, whether that's in your relationships, whether it's in your career, the more of those end up coming into alignment, right? So, yeah, good fit for this podcast, talking about alignment. And I feel like you end up being more aligned, the more you can step into your authentic self and just embrace vulnerability. And I'm sure we'll get into all that later. But that's my mission now, is to help guys, right, access that sort of grounded warrior energy where they're not trying to be someone loud and bravado that they're not, but it's just, and this is the big thing, it's always about becoming, it's not about becoming somebody else, self-development, right? Maybe you can relate to this as well. For me, it's about becoming the person you're always meant to be. But we've got all these layers of hurts that we've put to our ego. We're always protecting ourselves. We're playing small. All it is about getting rid of all these layers and showing up to the world in the best way that you know how to. It's not about being somebody else. It's being the best version of yourself. So, yeah, something I'm really, really passionate about. And yeah, I think the nice guy syndrome, wearing this mask, it's a way we can self-sabotage, I suppose. Big theme for you. And yeah, I think by putting on that mask, we are self-sabotaging because we're essentially saying no to all the opportunities and people that don't align with us, and many different layers to that. And this is where you go into layers such as perfectionism and, yeah, fear of failure because of other people's perceptions of you perhaps, or societal expectations. So many different webs you can go down. And yeah, as you can probably tell, I just find it all super, super exciting. And yeah, that's why I'm doing what I do today. I'm sort of helping people step into the best version of themselves.
Love that, man. It's funny, actually, at the moment in my coaching group, we're actually reading No More Mr. Nice Guy. I've heard the book recommended numerous of times, and as I'm reading through it, there's some things that I relate to, and it's crazy. We're going through the fear of conflict at the moment with one of the guys that works in the program. He was saying that sometimes he just doesn't stick up for what he thinks is right. With the fear of conflict, how did it come up for you in your life? Like, in what situations would you normally avoid conflict?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think at school I'd always sort of fit into this role of the people pleaser. And this was because, for what I've learned now, you attract the same types of people and situations into your life as long as you don't change. So for me, it was, okay, if I try and express myself authentically, that's going to get shut down. And a lot of the time when I did stick up for myself at school, it caused a lot of problems, right? And that results in a lot of confusion. And I think you learn these patterns of behavior at school, right? You speak up, and then suddenly you're going to be the weird kid who's picked on. And you develop these sort of defense mechanisms. And actually, I've got quite a nice perspective on this. A lot of the time we can resent these parts of ourselves. It's like, oh, well, come on, why don't we just be braver or just push ourselves to not avoid conflict. But I think it's also about having compassion with yourself. I think it's important to mention that early on because it's pretty impressive, right? You're as a kid, you have no real idea of how the world works around you, but you've developed this defense mechanism to protect yourself. And you've done that subconsciously. You haven't even realized that you're doing that. So I think it's also going, oh, right, having a conversation with your inner child. And that's a huge part of the healing process, I think, having a conversation, saying, wow, okay, thank you so much for developing these mechanisms. I think that's incredible what you've done. But in the adult life, we have to say, right, okay, that's not necessary anymore. And you have to take responsibility and show your younger self that it's safe. Now, in terms of fear of conflict, this happened in my early relationships with women. And a big incident that happened with me is I always thought, oh, those guys who are really loud and they're horrible with women and they shout. And this is what happens as well when we observe that. As we're younger, we see these male figures of shouting. We think, right, that's not us. We don't want to be like that. So we try and be the total opposite. So in my mind, that was, okay, right, just don't make a fuss. If something's annoyed you, it's, okay, just keep it down. Be stoic. And there's this big, I think stoicism's great. It has its place, but we can take it the wrong way sometimes. In terms of not expressing our emotions, it's very, very important that we express our emotions. And for me, the lack of conflicts was, I really don't like that. And this is a huge part of the learning process, but I really didn't like that. But, if I say that, they're going to think that I'm an angry person, I'm not cool, I'm aggressive, whatever it may be. And I would become that person that I didn't want to be. And it's fear, right? And it's like, okay, you know what, I could say that, but then, and that was the big one in the romantic setting. And I think in social situations as well, I was not saying what I thought I did about the people around me because I thought, well, if I don't agree with something, if I say, no, I don't think that's true, or hang on, you like this, I know you like this rugby team, or you like this aspect, or you like this person, and I don't really agree with that. Or maybe they've done something that is out of alignment with your values. Maybe you're at a restaurant and someone's been really rude or they're gossiping about people and you don't like gossiping. But if you say something, if you say, I don't really agree with that, or why are you saying that? Subconsciously, you know that, right? Or at least you think you know that if you say these things or state those things to that person, then they're going to say, what do you mean? And again, I think your mind amplifies it, right? But the fear in your mind is you're going to be ostracized from the group. You're no longer going to have people to talk to, and you're no longer going to have that community. We all want that sense of community, right? So for me, it was, okay, I'm not going to say that because I'm the cool, I'm the chilled out guy. And what happens is you become further and further disconnected from who you really are because you don't know what your values are. Or perhaps you do, but you're going further and further away from them. The relationships never end well. In my case, it devastated me because of the sort of circumstances and the events that transfolded. And that's a big thing we can perhaps get into as well is responsibility, taking responsibility, right? So for me, by people-pleasing, by not stating what I thought, this creates a bit of a grey area, right? It's like, okay, so what do you stand for? It's like, I'm sure if you speak to parents as well, if you don't have boundaries with kids, then they're going to do everything. They're going to do all this crazy stuff. And I think you need an element of that. You need to know, okay, what can I do? What can't I do? And what happened with me was I would just be trampled over. I'd let people treat me a certain way because I hadn't learned to stand up for myself. So your relationships suffer, your friendships suffer, you're not being authentic, meaning that you're going to get very confused. You're going to resent people because they won't connect with you deeply. They won't understand you. And this was my case for a long time. I was thinking, why won't these people understand me? Like, why? And I felt this big, like I was being ostracized from the group, even though no one had said anything to me. And there's this big mental game. But what really happened was I wasn't being authentic. I was playing small and I was fitting a role that I thought I had to play by not standing up for myself, by not saying what annoyed me. And you create this sort of victim mentality, right? So this is why it's so important to, again, be polarizing and choose conflict, right? It doesn't mean you become a horrible person, but it's like standing up for what you believe in. And that's super important, because without that, then who are you, right? And for me, it was not saying things when I probably should have. And it's not just one outcome. It's not just one event. It's a string of events, right? It builds up over time as small little pieces of anger or small little things, but you push it down because you're the cool guy. You avoid conflict. And what happens is you're just gently, and then suddenly all this stuff, all this mini bits of anger and resentment have piled up, and suddenly someone's done something and you've absolutely flipped your shit. You've gone absolutely crazy, and everyone's like, well, why'd you have an outburst for? Like, oh, you're a strange guy. Why have you done that? Like, he's never done that before. What a weirdo. It's like, and again, it's easy to fall back into that victim mindset. Oh, it's these people have done this to me. And that's what keeps you stuck, because you're not taking responsibility. And I did that for a long time. I was up to this victim mentality, and it's very easy to do. Right? It's an easy thing to do. Oh, why is this happening to me? And oh, this person's horrible. Why would they do that? But it's about, no, taking responsibility. Okay, I didn't, and this all happened. All this stuff, all these big events, they all happened because at some point you avoided conflict. So that's why it's super, super important. Coming back to your question, from my own learning experience, it was like, no, I've got to say straight away what I expect of people. And I think there's different processes, right, which you can go about that. But yeah, I'd say that's one of the most important things is, if you don't like something, say it. Like, absolutely say it. And then the right people in your life will come towards you, and the people who aren't aligned with the best version of yourself or aren't attracted to you authentically, then they're not meant to be in your life, from my experience. There's something to think about there. And I'd encourage people listening is, okay, where in your life can you start not necessarily looking for conflict, but where can you state what you think in a low risk environment, right? So for some people, it might be a big step up. If you've got a certain friendship group and they might be the only friendship circle that you have, and you say, right, by speaking up, you might lose everyone. Okay, cool. I have my thoughts about that, but for some people, that might be too big of a step. Start with like a low risk scenario. Maybe it's someone you just met. Perhaps it's one evening randomly, it's a friend of a friend, or maybe you've bumped into someone, whatever it may be. Just choose a low risk interaction and practice being authentically yourself in terms of challenge people. And what I've done with my guys working with is, if you're in a sort of restaurant type scenario and there's a group of 4 or 5 of you, use that as an opportunity. If they're people you actually really trust, and that can be a great way to then go, oh, actually, no, I really disagree with that. And yeah, I'm sure we'll get onto that later, mate. But yeah, I think in terms of conflicts, it's a tough one. But on the other side of that is the thing that you want, the relationships that you want, right?
100%, man. I think it can be empowering to pull people up on like things that you don't feel is right. The other week there, I was in the gym, and some guy actually booked in for a call with me to start coaching, and he didn't show up. I asked him, was he going to be there? Never showed up. And then I actually bunked into this guy in person. He never texted me to say sorry or anything like that. And I seen him in the gym, and he's like, oh, hi there, Mo. And I was like, oh, what's up, man? And then out of nowhere, I just said, where were you for the Zoom call? And he just was like, he started to go back in himself. I said, bro, if you're going to do that, you have to let people know that you're not going to come to the call. And it crossed my mind to let him off the hook, you know, and I was thinking, if I let him off the hook, I'm just being the nice guy here. But I was like, nah, I'm not letting him off the hook. Although I'm not angry now, he needs to respect people's time, because if he's not respecting my time, he's not respecting his own time. And I was like, I'm actually helping him in a way by telling him exactly what I think about him.
Yes, I love that you've done that. I'm proud of just observing that. I think it's so important. And you mentioned another one there, boundaries, right? And this happens in the workplace and all these different scenarios. It's asserting the boundaries early on, right? It might be a bit uncomfortable for some, but let's say, for example, you're running a team and you've got 3 guys there and you're starting a new project, or you just employ 3 new people. Let's say you're getting them to, they've got to do this, this, and this, okay? And you set maybe a deadline for that. Okay, this needs to be done by Thursday, 7 p.m., whenever it may be. What will happen is if you haven't asserted the consequences of not doing that thing, you might find that a lot of the time they might say, oh, yeah, no, this came through. I've had to delay it a little bit. And then you're wondering, oh, hang on a sec, why won't they do anything? Well, it's because you haven't told them the consequences of not doing anything, or not doing that thing. Like, what's actually going to happen? And you've just told them to do something, but what happens if they don't? They don't know that, right? And this is why if you just say early on, it doesn't even need to be conflict. You just say, right, guys, and it can be in a friendly way, but just say, hey, okay, so by the way, this needs to be done by this time. If you don't get it done, and I'm just thinking about the workplace setting, it's not my forte, but in this example, you could say, all right, if this doesn't get done, then you will get a strike, and then if you don't get it, if this happens again, you'll get a second strike. If it doesn't happen again, unfortunately, we're going to have to let you go, for example. And you just set that out at the beginning, then eventually they know the consequences, and then it's a conscious choice whether they do it or not. And if they don't do it, then you can say, well, I told you the boundaries. But if we try and assert our boundaries after they've crossed them, there's a disconnect there. And it's definitely something I'm guilty of, is not asserting my boundaries early enough in our relationship and then resenting someone because they haven't followed my boundaries, which I haven't even talked about, you know what I mean? And that's where I think we've got to look at ourselves and be honest with ourselves. Okay, does this person know our expectations of them, or have we just imagined it in our head, or is it obvious to us? But it might be obvious to us. Well, it's obvious they've got to do that. Okay, but have you told them specifically, these are the consequences if you don't do that? And it's a subject I'm really, really interested in because, like I said, I think a lot of the time we do just expect things of people. And when it doesn't happen, it will leak out in other areas. So it will damage your relationships because they're not following what you told them to do. So you're confused, but then you've also got this polarity of, oh, but I don't want them to dislike me. And then you go into this whole web in your mind when if you just followed the first steps, everything would be okay, right? So I think something to nail down early on, certainly.
Love that, man. Good assertive communication from the start, in like letting your boundaries be known, so then you don't have to have resentment in the future. Resistance is something that comes up for a lot of people, okay, when they're stepping into a new version of themselves or thriving. Along your journey from like turning from like a nice guy into like the guy that you are now, did you face any like resistance along that way to being a nice guy? Did you want to go back to being a nice guy? What was the big resistance that you faced? Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's resistance not only from yourself, but from other people. And when your mind's been programmed a certain way for a long time, there's always going to be resistance there. Absolutely. When you're shifting into a new person, when you're becoming the best version of yourself, there's always going to be resistance there. And you're going to sometimes wonder, hang on, what's actually going on? What's going on here? This is so uncomfortable, and it can sometimes be in the less obvious ways as well. And it's very easy to fall back into that trap. So I remember when I was first shifting out of the nice guy trap, I went quite far in the opposite direction. I was just being very stubborn, very, okay, you know what? Yeah, F everyone else type of thing. I'm on my own journey. And I actually excluded a lot of people from my life. Went down this sort of kind of lonely path where I didn't feel lonely, but I was alone. And I thought, you know what? I went so far down the opposite end of the spectrum. I didn't have any type of, sort of social circle or anything. And I closed myself off to the world. And in one instance, it was okay because for me, it was easier to not get hurt because being the nice guy hurt me. I had opened up my heart and it got shut down and it closed you off. So for me, what was happening was when people would try and enter my life, I was very distrusting in terms of my relationships as well. I wasn't very vulnerable as well. I just didn't want to open myself up. So the resistance in that case was just resistance to love. And that can be an issue because when we open up our hearts and we're vulnerable, that's when we usually get the best things in life. That's when we attract the best partners in our relationships. That's when we attract the best sort of people. It's when we start to embrace our authentic side. Whereas for me, I just sort of closed myself off to the world. And that's the biggest struggle I had in terms of getting over that. That was a big process for me. That was the other side of self-development where it was, okay, let's look intrinsically. What are these barriers holding me down? I did some plant medicine experiences. I met my girlfriend and she was she was incredible because with her, I felt seen for the first time. And I really felt when we met at a festival actually. And the morning after we met, I ran into her again because I met her very briefly. I said, "Oh, should we go for a coffee?" And yeah, she said, "Yeah, absolutely." So we had a lovely coffee and she was listening to me for the first time. And in terms of, I'd never felt that listened to before. Usually I'm I'm trying to come up with words. And I think a big, coming back to your resistance piece, I think it's very common for us to, I think it's very hard to just sit and wait and not rush and slow down. I think there's always a pressure of us to, like the nice guy is just like filling in conversation and just going, yeah, we're not actually being present and not really thinking about what you're going to say. It's just, okay, right, how can I manipulate this conversation so that I don't look silly or don't do anything like that? But coming back to this date, I didn't feel rushed. I could actually slow down and think about what I was going to say, and I felt seen. And that's when I listened to, and that was a whole process. And she's completely transformed my life now because I've started to be comfortable being seen and the real me, and someone's actually understood me. Whereas with the nice guy, a lot of the resistance we face breaking out of it is because we form so many layers to this personality that people can't see in who the real us is. For me, I had like quite a big ego. I was this like I said, I was minding my own business. I was closed off to the world, and I perceived myself a certain way. And the resistance comes when you actually try and open up again. Once you've gone through that process, you realize, oh, there's so many defense mechanisms here. I've closed off my heart so many times. And that can be painful because closing your heart, well, that's easy because you've been hurt. We're talking about the inner child experiences before. I think we're born into this world full of love. And because of the experiences when we were younger, we tend to close ourselves off. Okay, if we do that, we're going to get hurt. So let's not do that. And as we encounter more experiences in our adult life, unfortunately, when they are traumatic or they've left an imprint on us, we can close ourselves off. And I think the real challenge is opening up your heart again. And you'll notice, this is what I've learned speaking to a lot of guys, is that they'll try and communicate their feelings or be vulnerable, and their mates will sort of shrug it off and just change the subject, or they'll say, "Oh, okay," and they get uncomfortable. And that's usually because they're not ready to hold that space for that because they haven't had that or held that within themselves. So this is why I'd say if you are sort of looking to get out of the nice guy trap, ironically, a lot of people think that getting out of the nice guy trap, you have to be an arsehole, you've got to be rude to people, you've got to be closed off. And maybe that is a step in the recovery process, at least it was for me. But actually, I think if you want to go right to the end, it's actually about embracing your vulnerability, and it's about learning to open up your heart again. Because once you do that, and this is where I've had the biggest breakthrough with my guys who I'm working with, it's where they've had so much fear going on in their head that they think, oh, if they show the real them, then they're going to get shut down just like they were at school, in the exact same way that they were picked on. And what happens is they be vulnerable to the world, to the right people. That's an important point as well. Because if you're vulnerable in front of and people don't hold the right space for you, then that can be quite damaging as well. But it's a risk. It's a risk you play, right? Yes, you're going to encounter resistance to opening up again, because that's a crucial point. But what's riskier for me than potentially getting hurt for people not liking who you truly are, the bigger risk for me is living a whole life where you're not opening up your heart and you're playing the same role you've played throughout your whole life. That for me is the bigger risk. So yeah, I think in terms of getting out, the resistance was actually opening up my heart again, because closing it off is easy. But if you can open up your heart and just trust, and if you can just trust that, okay, you know what, if I follow my heart and I practice authenticity and vulnerability in front of the right people, then I can make that step happen. And what I recommend for people to do is, if your friends currently, you don't really trust them to hold that space, and perhaps maybe your parents, you don't feel safe to express yourself emotionally in front of them, very common with sort of previous generations. They weren't taught to open up about their feelings, right? Ever since, I think it's World War I especially, ever since the just sort of generational trauma, people wouldn't open up to the world. And I think what you can do is go to a men's circle if there's one near you. I know in the UK, you've got Andy's Man Club. I'm sure there's some in Australia as well. I know Bali, they had a great couple going on there. See if you can find a men's circle and learn to be vulnerable in front of someone. And sometimes if you've got the money to invest in a coach, then fantastic. But a coach who you're aligned with and you've got the same values as, because then if you trust someone and you can open up to them, that's still another man you can be vulnerable in front of. But I think learning to be vulnerable in front of other men is such a crucial step in our development. And it's something I don't think we're ever really taught to do. And yeah, the benefits from my side of being able to open up in front of other men and be vulnerable has been instrumental. I think that can translate into success in other areas of your life as well. And your relationships generally will be a lot better too.
Yeah, I love that, man. So when it comes to opening up, I think in October I had one of them experiences where I just felt way more expressed and feeling on a different level. And I think a lot of guys are actually scared of that. They're familiar with suppression. They're familiar with suppressing themselves, and they might not even be aware of it, but they fear that vulnerability, that fear being expressing themselves fully. And that's a big issue. With the perfectionism, which you kind of spoke about before, how is that cropping up for you? And how is that journey now? Have you got to a different stage of perfectionism, or so what's your kind of views on the perfectionism?
Yeah, perfectionism is an interesting one, because I feel like when you think you're out of it, you find that you're still in it, and it's a never-ending journey for me. I think it comes in stages. For me, it definitely leaks into my work quite a lot, and the podcast that I'm doing. I think, and you buy into this whole culture of posting every day and making sure your content's okay. And I remember we were talking about sort of editing reels earlier, and it got to a point where I was just, every single detail, there was like or there was something like that. And I was going through it and I'm like, hang on, why am I actually doing this? You've actually got to take a step back and really look at, hang on, why am I actually going into this much detail? So I'm doing all this because of my perception of what's perfect or how it should look. Whereas the real message or the real idea is to just get your stuff out there. For me, it's so subconscious, man. It's so subconscious, because even if you say to yourself, I don't care what people think, you don't. But subconsciously, what's actually going on beneath the surface? And you then trace it back to your relationship with yourself, right? So for me, I was a perfectionist because I was covering up for shame. And perfectionism and shame is actually very, very linked. If you talk to a perfectionist and you say, what's your relationship with shame? They might go, oh, well, no, I don't identify with shame. I just have a high standard of work. But I think having a high standard of work is very different from being a perfectionist, right? And there's different traits that we can go into perhaps. But for me, it was, okay, what shame am I really hiding? And I traced it back to my experiences when I was younger, and I had so much shame over just being me, and I like people being picked on at school and all the just that feeling, and that's why we've got to notice now, right? When are we exhibiting symptoms of shame? Because then we can counteract it. But coming back to perfectionism, all of this was, even though if I say, right, I don't, whatever people think of me, that's fine. I've moved on from that. But what I'm really doing is I'm protecting judgment from my younger self, from that child who just felt like he didn't really belong anywhere. He was worthless. He had low self-esteem. And by being a perfectionist now, even if it's 20 years later, 15 years later, it's a way of, okay, if I'm just get most of this right, no spelling errors, none of that, then they can't attack me. They can't find out who I really am. And who I really am is that lost little boy who just wanted approval. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, when the thing is about self-development, we talk about sort of healing, like, you've got to heal your wounds and you've got to, the reality is, I don't think we're something that necessarily needs to be healed, right? That's always going to be a part of us. Like, our experiences have shaped who we are today. Like, there's something very special about that. But we've also got to form a relationship with our inner child and who we were as a boy. Because if we don't, we try and push him to the side and we try and live up to these expectations we've put on ourselves, all because we want to be further disconnected from him. Whereas the reality is, the imperfections is where sort of the beauty in us lie, and we need to learn to love ourselves no matter what form we come in, right? And no matter what our ability is. It's like, for example, if you get two babies who are born into this world at the same time, say this to my guys, it's like, okay, two babies are born into the world. Is one worth more than the other baby? It's like, well, no, of course not. Like, they're both human beings born into the world. So then you're thinking, okay, well, if we're born into the world equally, then we've got to have that mindset of, right, we're all worthy of love and connection, right? No matter what we do, it's not conditional on something else. Love and belonging, we all need, and we all deserve that sense of love and belonging, right? So it's about, okay, how am I showing up to the world and what am I covering up for? And for me, I was trying to get so disconnected from who I used to be just through my everyday actions. Whereas if we can go, okay, you know what? This is the best I've done to my ability. Yeah, I could stretch it out a bit more, but coming into the rational mind again, right, I've actually got a lot more things to do and this is taking up way too much time. Let's just put it out there because I'm worthy of love and belonging no matter what I put out there. And this is the best I could do in this period of time. If you know deep down that's the best you could do in a reasonable period of time, then there should be no shame about putting it out there. And if there is, then I think that's where you got to have a conversation with myself. And yeah, even now, mate, like, I had this conversation with my girlfriend. Sometimes it's about having your hair a certain way. Okay, cool. Like, you feel good in yourself if you just had a haircut. Great. But how do you feel about yourself if you haven't had a haircut in a month or two? What happens if you don't? What happens if you don't have your hair a certain way? What is that threatening to your identity? What are you really protecting there? It's about having a conversation with yourself, right?
Yeah, perfectionism, man, is such an interesting one. Like an unhealthy standard that we hold ourselves to. And I've struggled with perfectionism in many areas. You know, I've overcome it in terms of food, and now I help other guys overcome when it comes to food. But perfectionists a lot of the time will struggle with their relationship with food because they demand perfection and they're all about, right, I'm doing this, I'm on track, I'm eating clean. And then the minute that they have something that they perceive to be bad or dirty, then they are really self-critical of themselves. They start overgeneralizing, like, oh, I'm a failure, I always fuck this up. Why does this always happen to me? You know, I need to try harder. So that's an area that I've done a lot of work with, guys. Where exactly did you struggle with perfectionism?
If it wasn't the work, I think it was my appearance as well. I prided myself on looking a certain way. I think because that's what built up my confidence, at least even if it was through external validation or whatever, or my perceived value, and it wasn't really substantial, that was still what I placed my value in. So it was sort of looking a certain way, the way I sort of dressed, the way I had my hair was one we touched upon. I think work is a big one, and I think for me, I was wondering, okay, is there like a subconscious desire here to impress my father, perhaps? What's going on there? I've heard other guys talk about that. Yeah, a lot of this stuff, mate, it's all subconscious, I think. And I think the way I've sort of moved past it is knowing, okay, let's just take the work example, right? Let's say someone said to you, right, Dermo, no matter what you do, the outcome in 30 years is going to be exactly what you envisioned. 30 years, 10 years, 5 years, whatever it may be. If someone told you, yeah, by the way, you're going to reach this outcome in 10 years, then how would that impact your behavior and the perfectionist traits that you said you've been struggling with, right? You would think, okay, well, I know I'm going to reach that goal, so I'm just going to do it out there and get it done anyway. And I think there's something quite freeing in thinking, and this has helped me, thinking, I'm actually not that special. I think there's a lot of perfectionists out there. A lot of us struggle with imposter syndrome. I think we all do. I even do it sometimes myself. I catch myself thinking, am I actually qualified to do this? And then I remind myself, I'm like, no, actually, this is a big one. You got to remind yourself who you are sometimes. You got to think, actually, no, I'm here. And you just look, this is what I do with my guys all the time, right? A lot of the guys, especially when they struggle with perfectionism, they forget who they are. They're telling me that they'll first come up and they'll say, yeah, I think this is about myself, and no, I need to meet these standards, and otherwise they're going to find out who I really am. It's like, all right, well, let's look at who you really are. And then you uncover the layers and you're like, wow, you've achieved this much, this much, this much. And you're like, hey, there's so much to you. You're an incredible human being. And yet they don't see that. And that's why it's important to, again, if it's not a coach, just get someone who you trust and just get them to remind you of who you are. And eventually, I think if you can get to a place where you can remind yourself who you are, then you can combat feelings of sort of imposter syndrome, perfectionism as well. So that's how I've sort of managed to break through it. But again, also just reading up on the perfectionist traits, right? Because a lot of the time, and also what perfectionism's hiding, because a lot of the time we just think, I have high standards, and there is a difference there. But I think just doing the inner work as well can help you draw these patterns and just keep on going forward, and surrounding yourself with guys and talking with guys who struggle with the same thing. I mean, that's a big one. And just by talking about it, because again, like I was saying, perfectionism is just a mask for shame. And I think the biggest thing that shame doesn't like, in my experience, is being talked about. Shame likes being hidden away. No, they can't find out who we are. Get a group of guys, safe guys, who've been through the same thing, and just talk about how you're all perfectionists. Suddenly it's not a secret. It's not something you have to hide. It's just like, okay, cool. Right, how are we going to hold each other accountable? How are we going to move through this together? That's just some of the stuff that's helped me by just talking about it, having these types of conversations, right?
Yeah, and one of the things I've found with perfectionists is they set these goals that are sometimes unrealistic for them to achieve. And when they don't achieve them, they're self-critical, they beat themselves up. But then if they achieve a goal, they're like, well, it wasn't high enough standard anyway. So it's like a catch-22. You can't win. It's like even when you achieve a goal, it's like, it wasn't a big deal anyway. And I can definitely be guilty of that. It's always like, what's next? Oh, yeah, I achieved that. It's not that big of a deal.
Can you take compliments well?
Can I take compliments well? Depends on what I think. I enjoy compliments about what I do, for sure. If somebody gives me a compliment about what I do and how I've helped them, I definitely can take them on. Yeah, I would say it just depends. What about yourself?
Well, that's why I'm asking, man, because I've noticed a big pattern myself was I couldn't really take compliments or I'd shrug it off. And you're actually doing a disservice to the other person if they've congratulated you. But I would notice, like, even in jiu-jitsu, I would be rolling and then I'd have a really good roll. I'd like maybe tap out a purple belt or something. Or I'd have a really good roll with a purple belt. And then I noticed some of the other guys would be looking and observing and they'd be like clapping or they'd be like, and I'd be proud, but then I'd like shy away and I'd just like, it was like uncomfortable for me because I wasn't used to doing it. Really strange feeling. And I remember when I was a goalkeeper, I remember someone said, "Oh, that was it was this lovely chap who was watching. He came up to me and said, "Oh, that was a brilliant save towards the end." And I immediately disregarded it. And I thought, again, probably because of the perfectionist traits, right? I thought, no, it's the least I could do. Did you see the first goal when I gave the ball away? And I just play it down. And it's like, no, like someone compliments you, like take it and learn to be proud. And I think because I was so used to sort of putting myself down, like you were saying, you can't really take compliments. And I think just being wary of that is a big one as well, and shrugging them off, because that's a way of, it can show you a bit about your relationship with yourself perhaps as well.
100% receiving I think is something that a lot of guys struggle with, receiving anything. Like it could be a gift, a compliment. I don't know, did I tell you the last time about my story about receiving in October in Gold Coast? Did I tell you that story? I went to a workshop in the Gold Coast, and we were told that we have to go out and we have to get somebody on the street to buy us something $10 of value or more. So I had to go out and ask people I didn't know. This was random on the street. Can they get me something? Did I tell you this on the last podcast?
I think it would have been in person.
Yeah,
it's a great story.
Yeah, so I kept asking people and getting rejected, but I finally got something at the last minute, right? And he asked me, did I want anything more, right? The goal was to get over $10, and the more you get, the better. And I took this $10, this I think it was a kebab, and he was like, "Do you want chips as well?" And I said no, because I thought of the consequences for him. I wasn't thinking about the gift he was giving to me and how much that would make an impact on his day. You know, because I'm actually receiving a gift he's given. It allows him to give to me, and it taught me a lesson that to give, you have to be able to receive.
Oh yeah, I love that story, and it reminds me of when I was in Bali, and I was driving along with my motorbike, and my what's it called,
Wing mirror, yeah.
Wing mirror, that's the one. It's a wing mirror, and it's like it was snapped off, and luckily I sort of grabbed hold of it and I pulled to the sides, and I'm trying to put it back together, not really having much luck. And these two lovely Balinese men, they came up and they like spent about 10-15 minutes like fixing it and getting a screwdriver and fixing it back on. And I had a look at my wallet and I thought, right, there's like 200,000 Indonesian rupiah there. And for context, that's about 10 quid, right? And the way in which they saw it, they gasped. It's like, "Oh, no, we can't accept that, no." And then they tried to bargain. They said, "Okay, right, just half of it. We'll have 100 between us." And it really got me thinking. I was like, am I then intruding on their boundaries by insisting that they take the money? Or are they not accepting me just wanting to show my gratitude? Because that's a lot of money for the Balinese folks, right? I know sometimes some of them make, I know in like hospitality jobs, they'll make maybe 30,000 or a day, if that, 30,000, 35, 40,000. And I'll give them 100K just for like 10, 15 minutes of work. But I had this conversation with a really good friend of mine, brilliant life coach, and she was saying, well, okay, if they can't accept that money, then what are they calling in? Well, that means, and you talk about the abundance and manifestation and all these things. Well, if they're not accepting money, it's because they're not going to attract that in, because they repel it. They repel money because they're not used to having it. And so when opportunities like that to have money in come along, they're going to reject it, and then they're not perhaps going to be as abundant money-wise than they otherwise could be if they sort of shifted their mindset, right? Not saying that one way is wrong or the other, but I think it's really interesting in terms of like how our relationship with different things can sort of escalate, or we can, just our way of sort of receiving things in and, taking compliments or people giving stuff to us. If we can't receive stuff, then, we're not going to manifest these great things into our reality, right?
100%. One of my current mentors, he says, when lack represents you, it will be presented to you. I love that one. It's like, if you're not willing to receive, you can't give. And yeah, the way he just breaks it down is so good, man. The scarcity mindset. There's so much people operating from a place of scarcity at the moment. I particularly see it in Ireland, right? Everyone in Ireland is always giving out, giving out about this and that. And I know, like, when you put that energy out there, that's what you get. You know, sometimes rather than leaning more into like an abundance and focusing on what's right, what's going good in my life, rather than always focus on what's wrong with the country, everything that's wrong with the country. That's what Ireland's like at the moment. And there are things that are wrong, don't get me wrong. There's stuff going on that's not right. But when you give so much energy to that, you're sucking your own energy.
Oh, for sure. And it's just, how disempowering is that? Right? You're giving all your energy. You're saying, right, these guys control my outcome. It's like, no, I get it. Right? Some people might feel really passionate about something. They might protest. They might try and start moving and actually make change. And yeah, whether they'll make an impact or not, I don't know, because that's not the type of thing I do. But for me, I'm thinking, right, how can I make the most out of a situation? What can I do for me? Personally, I wasn't a fan of the UK so much. Maybe that will change in the future. I don't see it happening that much anytime soon. But for me, I found society to be quite cynical. I didn't really fit in there, right? So for me, I thought, okay, I'm just going to move abroad for a while. And yeah, that's the way I've sort of handled it. Not everyone will have the privilege to do that, I'm aware of. But yeah, I think if you do have the opportunity to change your situation, then absolutely do it. And if you can't change it, then accept it for what it is. Anything else is a complete waste of your energy. It completely takes away your power. But yeah, that's your only option, is to change it or accept it. There's nothing else you can do.
Travel is such an important one. Something that we have a value in, that we have in common as well. We both love to travel. Just to finish it off, I suppose, what are your big goals over the next 6 months or so? What are you hoping to achieve?
Well, 6 months or so. I'm really looking to build out the Growth Voyage community at this stage. Really get a group of like-minded guys who are committed to improving themselves. I think we can get carried away with the end goal sometimes, but I'm thinking, right, 6 months' time, I think getting a really lovely group of guys together, really great community where people push people, they step into their authenticity. And what I've noticed as well is the guys who are really committed to improving their lives and do the work, they're usually the guys who end up making the biggest transformations. And my goal is to attract as many of those guys in as possible who are ready to make change, transform their lives, and I think spark a movement as well. Long term, I want it to have a ripple effect, right? So the people that I help, my vision is that, okay, they're stepping into their authenticity, they're seeing how much they're loved and they're accepted for who they are, and then they can end up doing so much good in the world, but then also they can inspire other people and help other people do the same as well. So for me, it's about building that foundation and helping as many people as possible step into their authenticity and form a better relationship with themselves, right? So that's a big sort of mission for me. That's what my area is focused in, and on a personal level as well, just nurturing my relationships and sort of staying in contact with family and really nurturing those relationships. And because I think we have a habit as guys to look too far into the future sometimes, and I think, right, how can we be grateful for what we have now? So 6 months' time, I think similar state to where I'm at now, just be grateful for what I've got in this moment, really look around and appreciate everything that you've got. And I think the goals are important. It's important to be building something, but then at the same time, just really be in a state of, okay, my life's in balance, in the sense that, of course you're going to work more sometimes, you're going to do stuff but it's more like, right, I've got my priorities straight. I'm living within my values. I'm prioritizing the right things. I'm spending a good amount of time with my girlfriend. I'm keeping in touch with my family. I'm healthy. Health's the most important thing. Once you lose your health, then all your other problems evaporate. You just want to get healthy. So, yeah, I think it's just the simple stuff. If I'm living in a state of gratitude and I'm living a life of love and I'm following my heart and I'm not going, we're talking before about how easy it is to get dragged away through the ego's wants. And I think when you chase those goals too much and you get too attached to them, that's where you're pulled out of alignment. So yeah, if I'm living, I really think if you're living truly, authentically, vulnerably, and you're following your heart, then everything else will follow. So yeah, if I'm healthy and I'm living in a state of love and I'm grateful, then I think the other stuff will fall into place. That's my sort of way about looking at things.
Love it. So, like when you show up authentically, you're going to be having more impact on men's life. Where can the guys find you? So, can they find you on Instagram?
Yeah, man. So Instagram is at Harison Saunders, 1R in Harrison. Pretty simple. We've got the Growth Voyage podcast on Spotify, YouTube. We did our episode, which was awesome. Talked a bit about sort of self-sabotage there. And yeah, you can find us on Instagram as well, mate. So yeah, that's where you can find me. And yeah, absolutely. If you're listening to this, do reach out. I'd love to have a chat. If there's any sort of nice guy problems you've come across, or you're looking to step into your authenticity, then yeah, give me a shout. And yeah, also I just want to say it's been awesome sort of seeing the work that you're doing as well. I love your sort of messaging. I think you've got a really nice balance of providing value to people, but also offering sort of empathy as well. I think it's very easy for us to say, right, you should do this and do this, but no, it's like coming from a place of empathy, and I think you do that really well in the work that you do, from what I've observed. So I think that's really, really cool.
Thanks, brother, and the same to you. I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, man. It's been good.
Thanks.
Cheers, brother.